Hello, everyone. Welcome to our NITRO workshop today on the email manager tool that we have in NITRO. You should see this in your NITRO Studio apps page as one of the options to take a look at. I don't think it's used very widely, so that's why I wanted to kind of draw attention to it today. If you're using one of our help desk tools, you may see it, may be familiar with it, you may have used it, may not even realizing that you were using the email manager tool. But if you aren't using one of our help desk tools and you're interested in learning more about what this email manager is, that's what this workshop is intended for. So as always, if there's any questions, feel free to pop them into the questions box. I'll keep my eyes on that and try to address questions as they come up. If I don't get to them, of course, I can address them at the end of the session. And as always, I'm James Restivo with Crow Canyon Software. So again, thank you all for joining, and we'll get right into it. So what you're seeing on the screen, should be seeing, and if you can't see the screen, let me know, is our email manager tool and some of the settings. And it's fairly straightforward. So we're going to go through it in a little bit of detail here. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. But we'll just go through and kind of show you what it's all about. And really the intention behind it, kind of give you a little background on it, is to allow users to send emails from within SharePoint and directly referencing particular SharePoint items that you could do this through a send mail action, but you might have scenarios where you want to generate this email on an ad hoc basis, the middle of it. And especially when it comes to the IT help desk workflow, that comes up a lot, where you have your automated notifications to say, hey, the ticket was submitted, ticket was assigned, etc. But you're going to have those other notifications. Maybe you just have a question and you want to say, hey, I think we've resolved your issue. Can you check and let me know? Those kinds of things. Those types of emails are one-off. They get part of the value here is that it gets recorded in SharePoint. If you have a connection, you'll see there's a connection to this email tickets list, which you could set up on your own as well, if you're not using our help desk tool. But that's really the value of it. It's going to retain that email. If you connect it to this email tickets list, where you can store it, you can link it to the item. Of course, you have to have a lookup back to the item. We'll talk more about that in a little more detail, and I'll show you what that looks like. But just kind of give you a little background on what it's all about, what it can do for you. So first of all, to get to this tool, you can go through the list settings. And so if you're in the list settings for whatever list you want to configure this on, you'll see the Crow Canyon email manager settings. Now let's take this back one step further. How do you see this email button? Where does it show up in the form in SharePoint? How do you get to it? Well, this is to get to the settings. I'll show you that in just a minute, but just to back up another second here, if you go to a ticket display form, you're pretty much always going to see the send email button here, and it's called send email. That's just what it is. I don't think we can change that. We've had that request before. How do you change it? It's just send email. It doesn't get changed. But it exists there on your form. You can also see it in the list ribbon. If you see here in the Crow Canyon list view, it's also available, which can be hidden. If you're familiar with the list view settings, it's one of the options to hide or show the email button. And that's what we're talking about here. You want to hide it or show it. As soon as you select an item, that send email button comes up. If you select more than one item, it gets disabled again. But just to show you what it looks like, if I open this up, you've got these settings here of who it's coming from, who it's going to, which can be placeholders from the item. And then you have some templates that you can apply to send the email. You can include attachments as well. So if you have different templates, you can create them and have them pop up here. So if we go change that, you'll see that it automatically changes all the text below the subject line, and all the text gets changed, and you have a different template. But you see it's also pulling in information from this particular SharePoint item. So we're going to have some specificity as to which item we're talking about. You don't have to get confused. You got the identifier, whether it's case ID or some other identification of that item, you've got it there. So that you can use that to make sure the person you're communicating with knows what you're talking about. Now, how do we set all this up? Well, that's where we can go back to the list settings. You open up the Crow Canyon email manager settings. I have them open over here. And here's where you see the various options for setup. And from the top down, we're going to just walk through it. You got the from, to, and CC and BCC addresses. The from, you notice that you can have multiple options here. And the reason for that is that you can now provide you always could, but not like we just released it, but you can provide a drop down to who is it coming from. So it could be coming from me, which is whoever the logged in user is pressing that send email button, or it could be a generic address, or it could be a help desk address if you're using help desk, or some other email address that's receiving information, or whatever. It could be whatever address you want as the from. And you'll see when we come back here to the send email, it's got that drop down here, so you can choose one or the other. Of course, you can only ever have one from address, right? So we're giving the option to choose one. So it's not like it's going to be sent from 2 different email addresses. Anyway, and you can see he's pulling in who the 2 fields are and who the CC field are. So we go back to email manager. How do we get that me in there? Well, let me just show you real quick. If you don't have that there by default, which actually should always be there, I popped open this email manager on a generic Nitro site and it was there already, but if it's not, for whatever reason, gets deleted, this is all you need to do. Email address is me, and add that, it gets added to your list, and then you could always remove the options as well. So pretty simple, easy, straightforward. You've got a few other settings here for showing BCC, showing priority. On the form, you'll notice that if we pull this one up, it does not show those things. I'll just turn those on and show you what they look like. After I save the settings, you'll see them. You got your templates, and then for that, you got your an option to go and create new templates. So we ship the default template with the help desk. If you have it just in general, I'm just going to switch over to a general Nitro email manager so you can see what that looks like. The me is already pre-populated, and you don't have any templates, well, you just go and create a few templates. And those templates are going to be created. It's going to pop open this mail templates tab. So click that, opens mail templates, and now I can create new ones. And it's got the same mail template interface that you're familiar with from custom actions and workflows. Kind of the same idea, all the same options. You got your list items that you can pull in there. Some, because we're in the context of the user, we can put in some other references, contextual items such as today, now, email, phone, display name of who's logged in, etc. So we can put that stuff in there, and any of the list item content that we want to bring into the form, we can do that. We can put it in the subject using the add to subject, or put it in the body using add to body. Just select it and say, boom, there it goes. So that's your placeholder, and it's going to pull whatever's in the item. So you can create as many templates as you need to, and then you'll have those available in your dropdown. So you see we have 2, and so when I open this up, there's 2 available. Those 2. All right, and then in the email manager settings, we do the template. We can actually control the width of that email editor that comes up if we want to make it bigger or smaller, depending on what devices your users are typically using. You'll notice right now it comes up in a dialog. We could also open that up in a new tab if you so desire. And then we have the connection history list settings over here. So again, this is developed mainly for a help desk tool, but certainly can be used outside of that, where you can put in save that email essentially to your another list and connect it over to that, create that connection. So you got the related ticket ID, which is going to connect it in. And what that looks like on the form itself, if you create that connection, you have the separate list. What you're going to want to do is create an associated items column on your form to see that, if you want to see it here. And you'll see we have that email history tied right in, and it's going to be listed as an email type of outgoing email. So you got that, some information. This list that you'd configure, well, it's going to pre-populate some particular information. So we want to make sure we have sender, who it's going to, what type of email it is, because we could be taking emails in as well into this list. And that's going to give you that, especially with the help desk scenario, the ongoing communication. You see, here's the outgoing email, here's the incoming email, and you'll see that here. It'll show incoming whenever someone has sent something into that list. All right, and then the linchpin is that related ticket ID. Another piece of it, even if we don't, well, we could do that, or we could put some actions on it as well. So the actions are pretty straightforward. All we need to do, give it a name, and then what it's doing is updating a value on your form. And we've seen this in scenarios where customers want to record that they're waiting on a customer response, right? So we could do, let's say you have a field call communication status on your list, and you have one of your options would be waiting on customer response. So that's going to, when you send the mail from that item, because we know which item we're sending from, it's going to update that value on your form to waiting on customer response. Now you can use the list formatting to flag it as a different color, like yellow could be waiting for response, or green could be, or yellow could be pending technician response, and green could be waiting on customer response, meaning it's good to go. So you can use this to create flags on your list as well, depending on if you've sent the email or not. So if you send the email, from the send email button, you're waiting on that customer response, or you set some other status, you set work log status, whatever you want to do. You can do that automatically. So you don't have to create, then you don't have to go back, send the email, open the item, update the item, save it. So you can just do that in one fell swoop, send the email, updates one or more columns on your list, and you're good to go. So that is how that works. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's got like those good settings, but and actually I do want to show you one more thing. The BCC and the priority of that email will appear if I save that button, save that those settings. All right, yeah, there's the BCC and there's priority that you could set it as a high priority if you wanted to. By default, it'll be whatever you select in the settings, but if you want to give the user options to set that, you can do that here. Now I wanted to talk about a little bit, and certainly if you have any questions on this, come back, let me know, I'll come back to it. But what I also want to talk about is, how is this email being sent out to begin with? Like, what's the methodology? How is that working? So we're going to talk a little bit about how the workflow settings are set up to handle how emails are sent from the system. So what happens in the on-premises world is that you have a SharePoint server and you have a simple mail transfer protocol. That's how outgoing email is typically set up in the on-premises world. And so we're not doing anything from the NITRO side on that. We're just leveraging that connection that SharePoint has automatically to send those emails out, however they get sent out, whether it's through our workflows, automated notifications, or through that send mail button. We're using that. So if you're in the 365 world, though, it's a little different. And we need to use essentially a mailbox on your site. So we've used SendGrid in the past. SendGrid is not great because it does kind of spoof your email, and it looks like it's coming, your email's been spoofed. A lot of servers reject that, so it's not a great method. It does work, but it's, then can cause some spoofing issues and cause some issues where delivery, where it just doesn't go through. So that's why we have the other options for sending email from 365. So the other options you have are to set up a mailbox or to set up the Graph API. And let me just show you what those look like briefly. And so we go to workflow. And one quick note on workflow while we're here, you'll notice that the workflow settings page, again, for 365 customers, it's moved from, you may have noticed the workflow settings pages were on our Azure server. Now they've been moved into your SharePoint server. So if you notice a little difference in how you get to it or how it looks, that's where it's coming from. It's now in your, in your environment, in your SharePoint set, instead of on our Azure server. So a little difference there, but the settings are pretty much going to be the same, and look and feel is going to be the same for the most part. But if you're setting up for outgoing email from SharePoint in 365, this is where you'd want to come. You go to the NITRO workflows, you hit that settings link right here, this gear icon, bring that open, and you see you have a couple options here. There's using a mailbox, using SendGrid, or using the Microsoft Graph API. Now, we generally recommend using the Microsoft Graph API because that's the most reliable. It's internal to your system, and you can use any from address in your organization. So it's really great for when you have NITRO deployed farm-wide or tenant-wide, and you don't want to worry about the from address. Anyone can send as from the workflow settings or the custom action settings. So that's great for that scenario. But one thing that does happen, it does give the workflow manager access to all the well, not all the emails, but it can send from any of the email boxes, right? and some people get a little concerned about that. Obviously, we're not going to be sending anything from an email address that it hasn't been configured by you to send it, but we do get some concerns, some security concerns around that. So you can set this up to scope it to just particular distribution groups or particular AD groups or particular users that would give NITRO workflows access only to those mailboxes to send on behalf of them. Now, again, that's kind of limits what you can do with it if you're in a tenant-wide scenario, because what's going to end up happening is your emails will go out, but they might look funny, or they might use SendGrid, or they might use this mailbox, internal mailbox, which can look a little funny too. So it's kind of a trade-off. It's one or the other of what you want it to look like, but the Graph API, again, it's what we recommend to use, and we're actually going to be, if you notice this limit here of how big those emails can be, we're working literally this week on a way to increase that. We found a methodology to increase that limit, so you can now send larger emails from the Graph API. So if you've been frustrated by that limit before, you hopefully we'll be able to release an update next week that'll get around that. So it's coming down the pike. But anyway, so we recommend the Graph API because then whatever from address you set up in the workflows or in the send mail actions, that's going to be the from address that the user sees when they receive it, and the reply to is going to be that same from address. So that makes it all nice and easy, makes it look like it's coming from a standardized email system, and because essentially it is. But if you choose not to use that option, or it's not available, or you're not allowed to for whatever reason, we do have these backup mailbox and SendGrid options, so that when you are using a mailbox, we can configure a mailbox here. It could be a generic mailbox, could be I believe it can be, no, I think it has to be a valid mailbox. It can't be a shared address. But what we can do here is use that, and then any emails that get received will look like they're coming from that either look like they're coming from that mailbox, but if you have the send as permission set up on all right, let's just maybe it's best explained through an example. I'm setting up a workflow. I set myself as the from address, and for whatever reason, Crocan and support at crocan.com is set up as the email here as the from address, or as the mailbox that we're sending from. So what's going to happen is when a workflow runs where James Restivo is set up as the from address, the recipient is going to receive an email that looks like it's coming from Crocan support. So that's maybe not desirable. The only way around that is to give the Crocan support email address permission to send on behalf of James Restivo. And again, that could be a little tricky because now you're giving permissions to people who probably shouldn't have them, or giving a generic mailbox an option to send as someone else. Not always desirable, but it gets around the issue of the email being received as looking like it's coming from someone who didn't send it. Right. So what's going to happen is the person receiving it will see Crocan support, but then they'll reply to, and it'll be James Restivo, and that may work. That might work for most scenarios. But if I set the send on behalf of or send as permission, now it's going to look like it's coming from my mailbox, and so then the user is none the wiser as to who actually sent it. So that's one, kind of again trade-off with the mailbox option. And I think SendGrid ultimately, if you need to use it, you can. But as I mentioned before, it's going to potentially run into spoofing issues where it's coming from a third-party server from Twilio, and it's you can see right here we learned that they're not HIPAA compliant, so we made sure we made a note of that. So if you're using a HIPAA environment, it might not, definitely don't want to use SendGrid and turn it off. But the order of operations essentially is going to be, we'll look to see if the Graph API is enabled. If it's not, then we're going to use the mailbox. If that's not, then we're going to use SendGrid. If that's not enabled, then the email doesn't get sent. So one of those three options has to be there, and we always start with the Graph API to send things out. And then we use the mailbox configured here if it's configured, and then we use SendGrid here if it's allowed. So that's kind of how that works from email in the 365 world to send from it. So it's a little tricky. There's, again, like I said, some trade-offs and some workaround. It's kind of a workaround situation in some scenarios, but that's essentially how it works. But if you have any questions that I want to learn more about it, certainly feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to discuss it, discuss options, and discuss ways that will work could potentially work better for you. Now, again, if you're in the on-prem world, that doesn't matter because you've got your own internal server that's got the SMTP service, so you're good to go, and you don't have to worry about all this stuff. Um, that's how that works. But yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I wanted to cover today. Kind of a short one, keep it nice and light for the summer. And we'll be having another one of these probably in September. Topic yet to be determined. Feel free to let me know what topics you want me to cover. I'm always happy to take feedback as to what it is you'd like to see from these workshops. Make sure you're getting the most out of them. And otherwise, we're just going to be potentially recycling content we've done before, which is okay too, because it might be new for some people, and that's fine. But if there's anything new that you'd like to see that you haven't seen yet in these workshops, certainly let me know. If there's a topic, something top of mind that you're like, I really want to learn more about this. How does this work? Feel free to submit that through. Send it to me, james.restivo@crocanin.com. Send it over and say, hey, James, I'd like you to cover this. I'd like you to cover that. I think that'd be great. Here's a great workshop idea. We take all that feedback. We love it. And we appreciate it, and we appreciate all of you, and thank you all for coming to the workshop today. So I hope all of you are having a wonderful summer and continue to do so, and we'll be talking to you all soon. Thank you very much.